So maybe it's because I have two incredibly expensive and utterly useless pieces of paper from academic institutions of higher learning, but at some point last week I had the ego to ask people to submit videos of them playing their instruments so that I could critique them. The internet is an amazing place with a lot of really, really good information out there, but there's a big problem with it. A lot of people just don't know where to go next with their playing, what they need to improve upon, and how to rectify that situation. A good musical instructor will help you so much in your musical journey, and in this video I'm going to try and hopefully bridge the gap between internet and private instruction for at least a couple of these people and give them some ideas on what to improve upon, and yeah, just hopefully be that person that can say what's wrong in their playing and how to improve it and how to not suck at music. So the first person is going to be Alyssa Ann Sanders, a bass player, and yeah, let's watch her video. So when Alyssa sent me this, she mentioned that she had only been playing for a couple months, and I think it's really awesome for a couple months. The whole posture is pretty good just because the bass is at a 45-degree angle to the floor, and that's usually a good idea whenever you're playing bass because bass is kind of an unergonomic instrument, especially with the strap height, because the strap height is kind of low, but when you have it at that angle, it definitely helps your wrist be relaxed and straight. Bass doesn't really fit our bodies that well. It's kind of like just a worse guitar. Guitar is already kind of a pain in the ass, but bass is even worse. So that 45-degree angle helps. The fact that your forearm is at a kind of a parallel angle to the neck also helps keeping a straight wrist. Your wrist is a little bent, and I think you can work on that, but just the more that you can relax your body into this position, the better. Whenever you have technique issues, I think technique issues mainly stem from the fact that you haven't learned to mold your body to the instrument, and the more relaxed you can be while you play, the better. You're doing a pretty good job of that so far, but the thing that I think you need the most work on is your rhythm, something that I think everybody needs the most work on, not just you. That's definitely my weak point, but I think the swing rhythm is a challenge for a lot of people, and because you're kind of rushing it, and you're also kind of not locking into the groove so much. You're playing the bass, and you're playing the right notes, and you're approximating the rhythm, but it doesn't feel really locked in. So I think the way that you practice this is actually really slow it down and exaggerate those second eighth notes, because whenever you have a swing rhythm, there are two eighth notes which are uneven. Ba ba da ba da. Ba ba da ba da ba da versus ba 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 ba. So when you practice this, try and practice it like this. And I'm gonna kind of hum it out. Ba ba da ba da ba ba da ba da ba da. It's gonna feel really ridiculous, but just really focus on accenting that second eighth note and playing it really short in relationship to the first eighth note, which is really long. Play it out of rhythm. You're kind of practicing rhythm, not in time. And the way that you're doing this will make you feel at least a little bit more connected to the rhythms that you're playing and how you're actually approaching it on the bass. Because when you're playing, when you're this early in your musical career and this early in your bass playing, you won't have that sort of physical connection to the instrument so that you can actually deliver the rhythms that you're hearing in your head. And this will at least get you practicing the rhythms in a way that at least can connect you to the bass a little bit better. So that's my big advice for you. Thank you for your submission. Let's go to the next one, which is going to be Brandon Glitz another bass player. Let's check him out. So I would have loved to hear a little bit more, but you can get a pretty decent idea of where people are based upon just really short clips. I think a good piece of advice for you is take that pentatonic scale that you're noodling over and figure out ways of not playing it linearly in order. If you think about the minor pentatonic scale, it's 1, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 7. And when a lot of younger players and a lot of people who are new to improvising around the scale start with it, what they'll do is they'll just go up and down. But remember, you don't have to go 1, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 7. You just have to, you don't have to go in order. You can skip around a little bit. Maybe you go 1, 4, 5, flat 3, flat 7, 1, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 3, 1, or something like that, just going up and down in different ways. Combining the scale in different ways yields interesting intervallic results. A lot of people are obsessed with learning new and exotic scales when they haven't really exhausted all the interesting things with the minor pentatonic scale or the major pentatonic scale. You can get a lot of really interesting musical ideas out of a very simple sonic palette. And I think that's really exciting, just taking the minor pentatonic scale and coming up with weird ways of playing it. So maybe try practicing the minor pentatonic scale by skipping notes. Maybe go 1, 4, flat 3, 5, 4, flat 7, 5, 1. That will yield a whole new world of musical possibilities with this. The other thing I would suggest working on is try counting out loud when you're playing, because when a lot of people are new to improvising, they'll just kind of let their fingers fly and they aren't really accountable to the rhythms that they are playing. And then when they try and start counting out loud, when they actually have to feel and understand all the subdivisions in relationship to the basic pulse, everything falls apart. Not to plug another one of my videos, but try checking out my Improve Your Rhythm video. Not that your rhythm's bad, but I think you aren't 100% accountable to all the 16th note subdivisions that you're playing. But it sounds good. I hope that helped a little bit with some ideas on what to improve upon. And yeah, let's do the next one, which is Ian O'Hare, My Funny Valentine. Let's check this out. All right, I'm going to actually stop you right here. One of the interesting things, and I kind of almost knew this when I saw the title, My Funny Valentine, one of the interesting things that happens a lot of the time whenever jazz instrumentalists interpret ballads, like really rich, old-timey vocal ballads, is people kind of forget to learn the lyrics or never learn the lyrics to those songs. And I think that is kind of doing a disservice to the song and also a disservice to yourself, because you can actually get a lot more nuance in your lines if you're thinking about how the lyrics work with the melody. You know, composers are very cognizant of the fact that certain vowels will sound certain ways on certain notes, and the general flow of the poetry, the meter of the poetry, gives rise to a very specific way of phrasing the melody that they write, especially for these old, like Tin Pan Alley type songs. The lyrics are very important in how you shape the melody. Now, the way that My Funny Valentine goes, excuse the terrible singing and bad intonation, but just the phrasing would be more or less, My funny Valentine, sweet comic Valentine. And the way that you just played it was more like, my, for funny Valentine, which doesn't really, no singer would really phrase it like that. And I think it's okay to adopt a more instrumental approach. That's fine, but you really have to be, I guess, aware of this sort of thing, aware of how the lyrics will work with the melody, and that can definitely add to a more expressive interpretation. So, yeah. But you have a great tone, so I think that can go a long way. So let's just listen to the rest of it, shall we? Ba da 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 da. That's not how the vocal melody works. Again, there you excised several words from the melodies. Favorite work of art, and you missed a note in there, which I think, you know, it goes a long way to evoking a melody and evoking like Ella Fitzgerald singing My Funny Valentine, because a lot of people will know what that is. And I don't know, for me personally, I like how the vocal melodies work to all these songs a lot. So I'm attuned to how people will play these ballads. You know, ballads are really hard to play on instruments, especially instruments like guitar with your tone, and I said you had a really nice tone, and it's true, but I think that there's not enough sustain in it to have the amount of space that you're leaving. You know, whenever you're playing a ballad on like a saxophone, you can just hold one note out forever, and as long as you have the breath control and the control over the note and like the vibrato and everything, you can just hold one note out and it'll be beautiful and amazing. But when you have a guitar, unless you have really thick gauge strings, which a lot of guitarists, jazz guitarists have because they want to have as much sustain as they can, just the single note will decay so quickly and then there's nothing. You know, a lot of people talk about the use of space in solos, and I think it's great that you're using a lot of space and letting the melody breathe, but I think you also need to embrace the guitarness of your guitar playing, because it sounds like you're using the space as if it was a saxophone, but guitar doesn't have that much sustain, at least with your tones. So, you know, playing more chord melody type things, chord melody ideas, using more chords, chord voicings will really augment the melody in a way that it makes it sound that like you're really connecting with the melody in this instrumental way. You know, if you're not going to be embracing the lyrical content in terms of trying to phrase it like a vocalist would, definitely try and embrace the guitar content of it. So your video, I think, goes on for another 7 minutes, so I'm going to have to move on, but thank you so much for your submission. I think the next person we're going to check out is Beanie Boo 22, a bass player. So let's check them out. Okay, so I think the fact that you have a really good tone, nice, aggressive, raw, overdriven tone with your dark glass pedal is kind of working against you here, because whenever you practice technique, it's very important to be able to listen to all the flaws in your playing. Whenever I practice technique, I make sure that my tone is as sterile and clean as it possibly can be, and it's, you know, as ugly as it can be, so I can really focus on getting everything clean and tight. You want to be able to have a very controlled technique and controlled approach to the instrument. Rock music is not always going to be wild abandon. Rock music, at least in the sound, should always sound like wild abandon, but you should have a control of what it is that you're doing with your body in order to achieve that. And I think your left hand needs the most work here. I think you need to be able to control it so that you are not moving your hand into a different position for every note that you play. Some notes your wrist is wildly bent, sometimes it's like bent backwards. Sometimes you have a locked joint, especially in the third finger. Locked joints are something that we want to avoid because curved joints in your fingers are a much more efficient way of transferring energy from the upper arm into your finger so that you can play. Whenever I'm playing, I want to be as lazy as I possibly can be. I don't want to like move my fingers more than I need to. I just want to like play the bass, let my body do exactly what it needs to do in order to produce sound and nothing else. The other thing is when you're playing this kind of aggressive music, all of the tone production comes from your right hand. Everything comes from the gravity of the arm in your right hand and how your fingers are attacking the bass, everything like that. Your left hand should look exactly the same no matter what kind of music you're playing. Rock, pop, metal, anything and everything in between. Good left-hand technique is universal across the board. So work on trying to keep your hand relaxed. Try not to move it nearly as much. And I think this will improve your technique and improve your playing a lot moving forward. So let's keep going. Let's try this. Autumn Leaves by the Jacob Lawrence Quartet. Okay, the first thing that I want to mention is that sonically bass guitar, electric bass guitar, and jazz guitar are always kind of at odds whenever they're in this sort of straight ahead sort of situation, because they're taking up a lot of the same sort of low mid-range sonic space. There's ways around it, but I think EQ is a big thing. Also understanding the sound of the room that you're in, because, you know, there's a little bit of mud happening here. It's not terrible, but it's something that I've always kind of had to struggle with whenever I'm playing this sort of jazz and this sort of circumstance. I think there's a couple ways around it. I think if you're the bass player, you can play with a little bit more of a palm muted sort of technique to like get a little bit more decay happening and like not let the sonic space get completely enveloped by the guitar player and your tone sort of like melding. I think the guitar player can also definitely roll the bass down on their amp and have a little bit more trebly of a sound that can help. I know it's not as jazzy as having a dark guitar sound, but I think having a mix between instruments congealing together is a little bit more important than getting the ideal jazz guitar sound. Some things to be thinking about. It's not egregious here, but I bet you that's something that you might be thinking about in the future. So let's watch some more. Okay, a lot of things I want to sort of mention. Bass player, I think you need to be thinking a little bit more about the upbeats, all of the, basically like the ends of all the pulses. One of the big things whenever you're playing with electric bass is trying to figure out ways of making it swing, because upright bass is definitely a lot more suited for this sort of style. And whenever you're thinking a little bit more swing oriented, I mean, like you're playing all quarter notes, but whenever you're thinking about like, maybe in your head you're thinking all those offbeats just in your head. Bassline will have a little bit more forward motion and lock in a little bit better. I think the conga player really needs to like get his conga chops together in terms of how the conga is going to fit within this jazz thing, because it does, he's kind of like just lightly tapping it and with an accent on 3. So like in this sort of thing, it'd be go, 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 go. Yeah, like just at least a basic sort of jazz conga rhythm happening, because it seems like it's kind of just this milquetoast thing that's happening on the side and you don't even really need it. I think that the drummer, just having a little bit more of a concept of the shape of the melody, or maybe not he has the concept, but at least playing around the shape of the melody might help a little bit more. I mean, this is definitely, you can tell this is just sort of like, hey, let's play Autumn Leaves. Okay, but there's a lot more, I think there can be a lot more care put into how arrangements of jazz standards are put together. I think the guitar player is doing a pretty decent job, but again, like definitely not thinking about the lyrics of Autumn Leaves, either in French or in English. I don't think it's as important for these sorts of things, because Autumn Leaves is almost never sung in the same way that it's definitely always played instrumentally, and he's definitely filling it out in more guitar-centric sorts of ways. So yeah, these are some ideas to think about. I guess it just needs to hit harder to get that swing feel, to get like just the feeling of like you know, swing is kind of almost aggressive. There's like this swagger behind this. It shouldn't be polite. And I think for the most part, jazz has been relegated in this polite sort of background music. But in order to like take it to the next level, you really have to dig in. Digging in doesn't mean playing with loud volume. You can, at least for guitar and bass, you can like turn the volume down and that's fine. Have fun with the music a little bit. And I feel like jazz can sometimes delve into this sort of like, okay, we're going to play the A minor 7 and then the D7, the G major 7, where the Lydian goes over the G major 7. And there's like no sense of like, this is going to be a fun thing that I can play and I can sort of groove to. At the end of the day, you really want to make sure that whatever you're playing is something that's fun and you can groove to. Even if it's background music, I always want to make it like feel like I'm a rock star on stage, like really digging in and having fun, even if it's just like wallpaper music in like the background of a restaurant. You know, music's meant to be fun and you're supposed to play music. I'm not saying that you guys aren't having fun, but just some ideas that I'm having watching your video. Let's go on. Let's watch another one. Why don't we do, this is mazzazzk bass. Okay, so I love the song choice. I love the edits because, you know, Wolfpack is, I guess, becoming more and more influential for their meme video cuts. My big advice for your technique is just keeping a straight wrist. And I think this is something that I need to harp on over and over again. A straight wrist is very important because a straight wrist means a relaxed wrist. And a bent wrist means that tendons in the upper arm are going to bend over the carpal tunnel. There's the thing in your wrist, I think. I'm not a doctor, but I do know that a bent wrist, whenever you're playing, ends up yielding tendonitis or some sort of repetitive stress injury after a while. I have had a bunch of problems with my hand, and they all went away as soon as I adopted a very, very strict straight wrist, never bending it for more than, I guess, maybe 20 degrees. A good way of doing it again is to try and take your thumb and instead of putting it behind these fingers, move it off to the side and point it up towards the headstock of the bass, because that will at least make sure that your wrist will be straight while you're playing. Your right hand wrist is definitely another source of concern, and I definitely bend the right hand wrist, but for whatever reason, there's less stress that is applied to the wrist whenever you're playing because you're not gripping. It's not a gripping motion. It's more a pushing motion with these fingers versus the left hand where it's almost always going to be a grip, and that's going to be worse for your tendons in your forearm and just will in general be worse for your health to have a bent wrist. So please straighten up that wrist. Otherwise, love the song because Sesame Street is awesome. I think in college I had the idea to do like a jazz fusion arrangement of that song, and then I went back and listened to it and to try and transcribe it, and I realized that, oh wait, it's already a jazz fusion song. Sesame Street is a lot hipper than I thought it was. So thank you for your submission, man. I think we're gonna have to call it right now, just because we've done a fair amount, and hopefully some people got some ideas on how to improve from this video, and just got some ideas in my thought process on how I look at a video and what sorts of things that I'll pick up from it. So I'm sorry if I didn't get to your video. I mainly just wanted to select videos that I felt like I could intelligently comment on, and a lot of people submitted like drum videos or piano videos, and some of that stuff I guess I don't really have the ability to comment in an intelligent way about technique because I'm mostly self-taught, or at least the ideas that I have about people's playing are a little bit less technical and a little bit more about how I might feel about them if I was to play with them. So yeah, thank you everybody for watching. If you enjoy what you see on this channel, please remember to comment, like, and subscribe, and also consider joining my Patreon, because it's the patrons over at my Patreon that allow me to do this week after week, and I'm very, very thankful to everybody over at Patreon who has submitted questions and submitted videos, so thank you so much. And until next time, everybody, peace.